In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, and Giver of life. Today we remember and celebrate the life, faith, and work of Nurse Maude. I begin by reading from the end of the book, Nurse Maude, the First 100 Years. When Nurse Maude started her rounds in Sydenham in 1896, she, with her black bag under one arm and a bedpan under the other, was unwittingly staking her claim, her position in the town. Since then, the District Nursing Association had witnessed and been a significant part of considerable social and economic change in Christchurch. The organization had worked through 2 world wars, the great influenza epidemic, the good times, and the bad. And through all its changes, it has never forgotten its roots. As many of the board members and staff are still prone to ask, what would Nurse Maude have done about this? So who was Sybil Maude, and what drove her in her life? Where did she look to for her guidance and direction? Well, Sibylla was the eldest of 8 children, born the 11th of August, 1862, in the family home in this very parish of St. Peter's. They were a wealthy and influential family in Canterbury and in Christchurch. Her father, Thomas, had become one of the directors of the Littleton Times, and he was described as a friendly and good-tempered man. In 1874, when Sibylla was 12 or so, Thomas had decided that what he really wanted to do was not farm or be a director in the Times, but he wanted to be a lawyer. So he sold his family home, and he moved to London to study for law. While they were there for 4 years, Sybil attended a school at Linden, a select establishment for the daughters of gentlemen. When they returned to Christchurch, Sybil helped her mother with her 7 siblings. But her faith was important to her, and she was a keen member of the Anglican Church, and she would visit the poor in the parish on a regular basis. Sybil led the city in many ways. She became one of the first visitors to the Christchurch Public Hospital, and her interest in this charity led her to wish to become a nurse. For her to become a nurse was a challenge to the general idea of what is correct for women in good standing to do, for being a nurse is very hard work. However, she persisted. She observed that in the local scene that there was not suitable training for her, so at 27 years old, she took herself back to England to begin her nursing career in Middlesex Hospital. Sybil did well there. She was reported to be an excellent worker and thoroughly dependable, always loyal, true, and obedient. After nearly 3 years, she returned back to Christchurch, and she was very soon offered the job as matron of the Christchurch Hospital. Though much needed to change in the public hospital, Sybil became frustrated by waiting for approval constantly from the board or from other groups so that anything could change. And she felt the growing need to follow her real vocation, and it lay with the elderly poor who were sick at home and unable to get care. For in those days, if you were ill and needed to go to hospital, you had to pay. And if you could not pay, it became part of your family's responsibility to be looked after for the sick members, or by community groups, like the deaconesses from the Community of the Sacred Name. At that time, Mother Edith decided that Sister Rose needed to be sent to Christ Church Hospital for training as a nurse. And through that, she became friends with Sybil, the matron, who recognized companions to do community nursing work, the work that Nurse Maude was called to do. And so in October 1896, district nursing services were set up within the parishes of St. Michael's and Sydenham Parish for a minimum of 12 months. As Sybil was acquainted with the community sisters, she left the hospital and lived as an associate member of the Sisters of the Community of the Sacred Name, and she started her work as a district nurse from there. It was the beginning of a new journey. Her faith and her sense of vocation sustained her. When she entered a house, she began with a prayer, and then she got down to the business. In her first year, she made over 1,100 visits on foot to those in need. Her work was much more than nursing. As she observed, poverty, illness, and disease go hand in hand. So, not to be slow on the uptake, she set up a dispensary for people to come and visit, and a clinic space. She also established a sewing circle, and they were formed to repurpose clothing for children. Footwear and other clothing were stored in a little shop. Sister Rose, as a nurse and a friend, supported Sybil, and within 2 years, Sister Rose and Sybil moved into Richmond. At that stage, it was on the outskirts of the city, to establish St. Mary's Home for up to 20 young women. These were young women who were rescued from the police courts, the houses of ill fame, or from the cruelty of their parents. Then Sybil knew she needed transport, and having advertised in the local paper, she received a horse and a cart. Now the cart was wonderful because she could put all her needs in the back of it, and she'd set off each morning with Jip, her black collie, following along behind. Her basis, her philosophy, was services given to the sick poor in their own homes, regardless of religious denominations of the sufferers. She was called to sometimes relieve, sometimes heal, always console. The stories of her work and the expansion of the district nurse services throughout New Zealand are documented in this brilliant book. Did you know that Sybil supported a young ward named Lily, and along with the sisters, another 2 young women were financially assisted to attend schools in England? There were great stories of Sybil driving when she got her first car. She was described as an extrovert, and she needed to pay for her own insurance. On the 1st of January 1934, Nurse Sybil Maude received an OBE, and when she was awarded this OBE, a stone bust was commissioned to honor her, to be placed in the foyer of the recently appointed office in Madras Street. Sybil didn't like it. Though it was a very good likeness of her, she thought it too severe, and so she had it put in a cupboard for several years. Then, in 1935, King George awarded Nurse Maude with a King's Service Medal. Though Sybil didn't long to enjoy this final recognition. She died in July 1935, age 63, of a heart attack. The country grieved. Nurse Maude laid in state in Christ Church Cathedral in the square, and a long funeral procession led to this very graveyard where Sybil Maude was laid to rest and at peace, a faithful servant and child of God. And as our gospel today quoted, yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. So how do we follow the example of Nurse Maude and listen to God's guidance for our lives? It may be your inner voice. It may be the support of others, the notice from strangers of your gifts and talents. All these are affirmations of our vocational direction. And we can look to the 5-pointed star of the New Zealand registered nurse as a prayer, that the hand may ever extend to help, comfort and relieve the sick and suffering, the foot, that my feet may not falter, loiter, or linger when journeying to alleviate the suffering of the sick, the knee, that my knee shall bow, that my knee shall bow to the Almighty Creator in asking for guidance and aid in my endeavors to relieve the suffering of the sick, the breast, that my breast shall be a safe and sacred repository for any secrets entrusted to me or divulged through sickness or delirium or otherwise obtained, and the head, that I will constantly pursue and study the secret arts, and that I will exercise my knowledge to the benefit of those suffering bodily or mental distress, and I will disseminate such knowledge amongst others as my preceptors authorize and direct. May we have the courage to follow God's leading as Nurse Maude did. Amen.